Well, I want to pose the next question by reiterating exactly the warning that you just made, to put it into context. You said, were Glass-Steagall to be defeated, then the banks would simply cease all payments to their debtors and default on their obligations, and a large part of the population of the United States and Europe would be condemned to simply sit on the street and starve to death. Now, the fact is, this has already begun to occur. As most people probably know, at the end of this week, the city of Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, becoming the largest municipality in U.S. history to do so. After several months of having been under, literally, a banker's dictatorship, with an unelected financial controller sitting at the top of the destruction of the city and doing battle with the pensioners, the unions, the city workers, and so forth, the decision was made by this financial control board to file for Chapter 9 and to essentially cancel a large part of the obligations that were owed to these pensioners who worked for 20, 30, or more years to accumulate the pensions that were owed to them, canceling a large part of these pensions and declaring that they would be paying only pennies on the dollar of this multi-billion-dollar debt. Now, at the same time, Detroit, or the Financial Control Board of the City of Detroit, Kevin Orr, has announced that although they are not honoring the vast majority of the pensions that are owed to the people of Detroit, they have negotiated a deal with Bank of America and UBS in which they would be honoring the debts that they owe to those global banks, accepting 75 to 80 cents on the dollar, 80% or 75% on the dollar of Detroit's debt to those banks that were accrued under swaps deals, and giving this debtor in possession loan priority above all other creditors, including the people of Detroit, priority in bankruptcy proceedings. Now, this is a direct violation of the Michigan State Constitution. The Michigan State Constitution explicitly says that the debts, the pensions of public workers will not be defaulted on, in partial or in totality. So what has occurred in Detroit, I think, is a precursor of exactly what you have just warned about, which the rest of the United States can expect, and which is already occurring in Europe. And this situation should not come as a surprise. First of all, 1 year ago, a member of the LaRouche PAC Policy Committee, Bill Roberts, who at that time was running for Congress in Michigan, testified in front of the Detroit City Council and warned them in no uncertain terms that if you do not force through Glass-Steagall right now, Detroit will be destroyed at the hands of these Wall Street banks. His advice was not heeded, and instead the Financial Control Board was adopted. In terms of explicit pre-stated intent, the circumvention of the Michigan Constitution should not come as a surprise either. In an explicit statement of intent that was published at the end of May of this year, J.P. Morgan, in a 14-page paper that was published in Europe titled Halfway There, explicitly stated that in order to complete the job of austerity, killer austerity, in the countries of Europe, the obstacle that was standing in the way were the national constitutions of the nations of Europe. the anti-fascist constitutions that were adopted after the fall of Hitler, that these were the obstacles standing in the way of a total banker's dictatorship to finish the job. And simultaneously echoed along with the J.P. Morgan report was an article that was published by Jürgen Randers, who was one of the co-authors of the 1972 book Limits to Growth, in which it was originally stated that the carrying capacity of the world was only a few billion people, which has been surpassed since that time. Jürgen Randers, in this article that was published echoing the J.P. Morgan report, stated that democracy has failed, representative government has gotten in the way of the genocide scheme, and in meeting the so-called challenge of climate change, what is needed are authoritarian systems. And he praised the fact that in Italy, the birth rate has now dropped below the death rate, that Italy has the lowest birth rate in the world, only 1.3 children per woman, because in the last 20 years, a society has been created making it impossible for a woman to both have a job and a child, praising this as the paradigm for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. So the intent was stated directly. This is a confirmation of the warning which you have just issued, and this is also a confirmation of the warning that you issued when the original Limits to Growth Malthusian report was published. In 1971, when Nixon destroyed the Bretton Woods exchange rate system, you stated that what is in store for the future of humanity is shocked without Hitler. And this is what we're seeing now, the precursor of which is happening now in Detroit, and what has been put into explicit language by none other than J.P. Morgan themselves, with an explicitly genocidal intent. So I would like it if you could address the situation that we've now seen occur in the case of Detroit and what this means for the future of the United States.
What I've done in the past days have actually gone with an activation of the countermeasures. And that's that simple. We simply have to bankrupt these bastards, is I think the proper polite language to use in this case. And because we can, by going back simply to a document which is directed by the Chief Treasurer of the United States, which is the same thing as the Glass-Steagall thing. Once that's done, then the United States government takes over its responsibilities under the Constitution for the situation that now exists. And anyone who opposes that is an enemy of the U.S. Constitution and should be so characterized and described and told. Because what they're doing, as we see in this Detroit thing you just referred to, you're talking about genocide. Genocide against people of a city, a large city. Remember what happened, how this happened. It's a funny story, isn't it? We had an effort to shut down Detroit and what things associated with the auto industry. I got in on the thing to organize a countermeasure against that attempt. We were succeeding, but other special pressures came in. And then I was confronted at a large conference we had, which I had organized, by some people saying, no, we're not going to go along with what you're doing. We're going to take our money and run. And as a result of that, all this has happened in Detroit, for example, in the auto industry. Now, we had alternatives. We went through the whole business. We went through it officially, through the entire auto industry, people involved in it. And we calculated what we had to do to reverse the trend which had led to this crisis, or led into this crisis. And it could have been dealt with. It would have meant the change in the policies of someone like the Bush family and so forth. And the Bush family wouldn't have liked what I was going to do. And they got their way. And the Bush family has probably caused the death of a large number of people who are pensioners now and otherwise in Detroit and elsewhere. That's what's happening. So the point is, do we, as the United States in particular, because our republic and its constitution are unique in this planet. There is no constitutional structure to match our government, our constitution, in terms of dealing with these kinds of problems. What we have to do is recognize that this is our enemy. What's happening in Detroit, for example, is the action of our enemy, the enemy of the people of the United States. And the people of the United States have to take their own authority back under our constitutional privileges. And this kind of swindle, just these guys are going to be thrown out. Our job in putting Glass-Steagall through is that Glass-Steagall now becomes the pretext for the action. In other words, if Glass-Steagall is upheld, it becomes automatically, by the law, by the vote itself, the agency which reverses this horror. Just enforce Glass-Steagall, and that will give us the means to solve the problem. But it means that the people of the United States have to mobilize to make sure that the law is enforced, and start enforcing it now. And the intention should be now to do just exactly that. It's the only chance to save the life of your neighbors and your family.